Hello and welcome to all. I'm Laura. I'm a project manager at IMS Luxembourg, and it's my great pleasure to be here today. I will be moderating this roundtable, Climate and Biodiversity, Shaping Up New Ways for Converging Solutions. We'll have about 60 minutes together. We will talk about nature-based solutions, natural climate solutions, regenerative agriculture, and initiatives building bridges between the different actors of society. Whether you're here as a company, as a public institution, or as a citizen, stick with us, you are in the right place. Let me remind you, you can listen to us in French and in German thanks to our great team of interprets. So, bonjour and guten Tag for those watching us with the translation. Also, feel free to react to this roundtable on social media with the hashtag LSF2021. We're quite excited to read your action, actually. Right next to me, I have two of our brilliant speakers for today, James and Maxime. And Irene should be joining us straight from Costa Rica online, so should be there on the screen very soon. Anyway, thanks to all of you for being here today. And without further ado, let us start. First, I will turn to you, James. You work at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Your expertise tells us that nature is and will be more and more a key topic for companies. Why?
Well, thanks, of course, Laura, for the introduction and for the opportunity to speak on this topic today. I mean, there's a huge amount at stake here. The statistics around nature loss are really quite terrifying. Since the beginning of civilization, we've lost approximately half of our forests, half of our coral reefs, 70% of our wetlands. We've dammed 2/3 of our rivers. And extinction rates in nature are now 100 to 1,000 times higher than they are in background rates. So the real question here is, why is that important? What are the potential implications of that loss of nature? Well, the key concept here, which this all hinges on, is ecosystem services. Nature provides us with a huge range of goods and services that we as society and individuals rely on. They provide us with nature provides us with climate regulation, with oxygen, with fresh water, with food, with soil fertility, with the pollination of our crops, etc. And so really, nature is effectively an asset, something that we need to protect. And because of the ecosystem services that they provide. And as nature is degraded, the ability of nature to provide us with all of these services that we depend on is severely hampered and restricted. So the next question then really is, why is this important for business? I think this was really nicely summarized earlier this year with the release of the Dasgupta review from the UK government, which highlighted effectively that our economies are really embedded in nature and dependent on nature. Obviously, they provide us, the environment provides us with all of the resources that we require to support our economy, and particularly in sectors such as the food and beverages and things like that. So it's not just nature loss is not just an environmental risk, it's also really a fundamental risk to our economies, businesses and the financial institutions within them. And a lovely statistic I heard recently from a Swiss Re report is that effectively over half of global GDP is dependent upon highly functioning, healthy ecosystems. And so this is, these are the risks, and this is thankfully starting to be recognized by business leaders. We saw in the recent World Economic Forum risk survey that nature and climate risks are now in the top 3 risks, top 5 risks that corporates are aware of and are looking to respond to. And so that provides us with some hope for the future.
Thank you for that introduction. I see Irene is there right now, so thank you for joining us, because I know it's quite late or early. I'm not too sure what I have to say, but on your side of the world. You are from Curridabat in Costa Rica. There you developed the concept of Ciudad Dulce. I hope I pronunciate it pretty well, but I guess it's Sweet City in English. This innovative urban vision won many awards, including the Wellbeing Award 2020. So what is the Ciudad Dulce and where did it all start, Irene?
Yes, hi. Thank you very much for inviting me to this important event. Well, after a few years of observation and building closer relationships with the citizens, we started to pay attention to their demand. and move away from the offer vision that we have, positioned from a local government approach. And well, we developed some successful projects and prototypes and aim to offer superior basic services. And we aim to have big and dynamic parks in the city. For example, we had an excellent waste collection service. And at that time, we realized that we had to move forward to innovation, that it wasn't enough to offer good quality services, the typical services that a municipality offer to the citizens. So we moved forward and started to think on this short, mid, and long-term vision for the city. Actually, the cities that are more enjoyable, livable, walkable, these beautiful cities, the majority of the time, they have these urban planning visions that they can imagine how the city is going to be in, 10, 15 years. So we wanted to make that difference, because in Latin America, we usually do not have such planning. And the question that we asked ourselves is, how can we add value to the planet as a city instead of subtracting value from the planet? And actually, the main answer was a multidimensional framework, which is the base of Sweet City. And the base of this was biodiversity. And specifically, this base of vital ecosystemic services that we can offer to the citizens. We realized that the better possible services that we can offer to the citizens were ecosystemic services. And in countries or cities as Curridabat, which are very small, as the majority of cities in the world, we have been copied development models from big cities such as Paris or Rome, which have many economical resources. But what we have is a big base of these natural resources that we have the responsibility to manage in the city and keep offering, these vital services to assure well-being and happiness to our citizens.
Thank you, Irene. Maxime, as for you, you are the founder of the Climate Heroes project. This means you and several photographers have been sharing stories of citizens acting all over the world for nature. So let us start with what is a climate hero.
Thanks, Laura, and thanks for inviting me to talk today also. Basically, Climate Heroes is a movement that I founded and started just after COP15 in Copenhagen, 2009. And from 2010 to 2018, we've been around the world with other photographers to meet citizens who had already started acting to offer solutions in their own range of their way of living to reduce their carbon emissions. And it's really important that those citizens also were inspiring others to follow them. They were offering some sort of easy-to-follow solutions that could be scaled up, replicated, and so that they could also cover all the different aspects of carbon emissions identified by the IPCC. So that was the entire scope of the project, was to produce documentary photography and videography during all those years, and articles, and a book just came out about that, to tell those stories and inspire other citizens to also then, take the plunge, take the lead now and change their lives as well.
Very nice. Well, this is it for our brief introduction then, and let's now dive into our first round of exchange on nature-based solutions. You were mentioning IPCC, and it's very good because earlier this morning we had a representative from IPCC, IPBS, and WWF. They stressed the need to scale up action for biodiversity and climate, so that's very important, this joint view. And they mentioned nature-based solution as a powerful means of progress. So James, you work daily on these solutions, so maybe you can tell us what are nature-based solutions?
Sure, happy to. So nature-based solutions are activities that conserve or protect or restore either natural or modified habitats so that they can address some of the challenges that we see in our society currently in an effective and adaptable manner. But particularly as well, a key core concept of nature-based solutions is that they should also provide positive impacts on human well-being and also on biodiversity benefits. So that's kind of the key overview of what a nature-based solution is. I think there's a couple of other points I'd touch on now. We often sometimes hear the term natural climate solutions as well. Effectively, natural climate solutions are nature-based solutions which are deployed with the main goal of mitigating or adapting to climate change. So for instance, that could be avoiding deforestation or tree planting or mangrove restoration, etc. Another important few elements to bring into this conversation here is really also nature-derived and nature-inspired solutions. And these are somewhat different, but are also important as we look to manage many of the challenges we see. So for an example, for a nature-inspired solution, numerous car windscreens now have a very small hydrophobic layer of chemicals which prevents water from accumulating, and it runs off in a very smooth manner. And that has been a technology developed by looking at very high detail of the structure and format of leaves, etc., and adapting that to a technological solution.
Thank you, James. You were mentioning deforestation, forest management. Maxime, you have examples, I think, on these concepts?
Yes, for sure. One particular example, the beginning of the Climate Heroes project was meeting former illegal loggers in the rainforest of Sumatra in protected areas, and they had reconverted to sustainable forestry management, actually agroforestry, which is also how to grow things underneath the trees, and in so doing, they discovered many things. You know, they were migrants sent to Sumatra to populate that island, so they didn't know about climate change in the beginning, and so they really found that they could better protect the forest against fires, and then they were able to settle down. They were able to produce organic coffee. They were able to develop, their community. Their children could go to school. They could get electricity as well. Another example is one from Cambodia. It's also a country that has been deforested heavily for its exotic woods, and so there's a community of monks there who were able to protect that forest just with their own hands, and their robes, their saffron robes. And just educating the population to the benefits of having a protected forest, both for the climate, for rainfall patterns, for what kind of food they could get from the forest if they respected it and if they did not encroach on it. And it has been hugely successful because they were able to protect an area as big as the Fontainebleau forest. It's like about 20,000 hectares in Cambodia, just with their own hands,
These people seem very attached to their roots, because when you see how they restore and protect the nature around them, now I'm wondering, how do they cope with climate change events that they can't really control, such as fire or floods or droughts?
Well, the fact is that, for instance, if the forest is not deforested as much, the fire is not going to be that difficult to control for them, because, the fact to have dry wood exposed to the sun. I mean, losing that vegetation coverage is fostering lots of fragility for those ecosystems. So, keeping a healthy ecosystem, taking care of it, being there, it doesn't mean just letting it completely abandoned, but yeah, it's there's a way to maintain it better, to take care of it, to live with it in symbiosis with it.
I think you also have a hero building artificial glaciers or something like that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so in the adaptation phase, like this summer, I was working on the mega fires in California also, and so it's like another issue there, and how do people adapt to those now recurring mega fires because of the density of population, because of the drought, because of the heat. It burns every year now, and so they have to change the places that they can live in, and also in the Himalayas, there is this former engineer. a structural civil engineer who builds dams to protect to keep the water running from the glaciers that melts more and more earlier and earlier every year from just running to the valley. And then they kind of build little dams by hand. They choose the site according to the local knowledge of the villagers, so that the water slowly starts running, like slowing down on the slopes, and then in the shade of the mountains they can be in ice again, and so it creates those ice sheets that can then be used, like they melt later in the year, and then the farmers get water also to nurture their crops longer in the year, and so they can also produce more things than what they used to. It brings value also to their community, nutritious but also economic, and it's a way to adapt to things that you cannot really do much about when you're a citizen, right?
Exactly. So interesting. Irene, what about you in Curridabat? What do nature-based solutions look like in a city?
Yes, well, from a wider point of view, with these nature-based solutions, the city looks greener, of course, but colorful and livable. But on a more specific way, we have some examples, such as our pollinator corridors that are very important to connect green spaces over the city. And well, pollinators are very important for us, right? Because they are in charge of this ecosystemic service that we rely on. So these pollinator corridors we started to reinforce them through our sweet sidewalks. And basically, it was to start to redesign the sidewalks that we have that were 100% gray infrastructure. And we started to plant these native plants that attract and feed pollinators. And actually, it's very interesting because the citizens are starting to participate, and we do this by demand. So they can demand their own sweet sidewalk, and when the municipality collaborators go to build that sidewalks, everyone participates: grandparents, mother, dad, children, and even the cat and the dogs and everyone. So it's been very interesting. We also have other examples, such as our composting program. We have given many composting bits to the citizenship, and they are actually being very demanded also. Every day, more people are demanding their composting bits, and that this is very important for us because we want to improve the experience of the earthworm in Curridabat. And that means that we want healthier soils. Soil is being a resource that is not being very important for cities. And what we have done is to not, realizing the importance that soil has for citizens and for the living processes in the city, and, to fix carbon, and actually it contains the nutrients that we are going to eat through the food and everything. So we are making a lot of consciousness about the importance of soils and the importance to keep the soil and the land, in a healthy way in the cities, in the city.
Do you somehow measure the impacts on different ways or dimension of these biocorridors or other action you're taking?
Yes, actually, the framework of Sweet City has 5 dimensions, and we decided that we wanted to improve 7 different experiences on a 5 years first term, which is the base of our municipal strategic plans in Costa Rica. So we had a lot of experiences to improve, but we decided to prioritize 7 of them within these 5 dimensions. we decided that we wanted to measure our impact through the biodiversity dimension, which is the most important one for us. And we developed these biodiversity indicators, which are the first indicators of Latin America, based in cities, inspired in, in an urban context. And yes, actually, we are measuring flora and fauna increased in the city. We are measuring the quality of the air also in the city, and some other, indicators that we are made tailor-made for Curridabat specifically, and can work great for small-sized, natural resources-based cities.
Great. Maxime, you have seen changes in other cities, maybe? Like other actions taking place, not specifically around nature, but is there a movement that you see in cities going on?
Well, I mean, there is certainly, depending on where people live, they react, they organize differently. Like the people I met during the project, for instance, in Denmark, they were able to organize their own source of energy, renewables, when it's in other places like in Africa, it's also about recycling resources. So it kind of depends also which part of the world that you're interested in, like in talking, and how people, what kind of background they're coming from also. Yeah.
So it's a lot about making it your own, I suppose.
Sure, yeah. I mean, if you're looking for a way to start, usually it's like there is no perfect recipe. You're not going to be. I mean, everybody's a different context, and that's also the strength of showing all the different citizens, and whatever their job or their background, they all have their own ways of choosing how to start and find solutions. So when you start to become interested in that, and then you look inside, and then how do you want to make an impact, then things come naturally to you, also based on your circumstances as well.
You agree with that, Irene? You think it's maybe not so easy for a city to replicate your approach, but still feasible, maybe?
You mean to replicate this?
Yes. Would it be feasible?
Approaches? Yes, I believe it is, but I think it's very important to have an approach of each city's attributes and conditions, territorial characteristics, geographical characteristics, and well, I believe that everyone can ask ourselves, the same question: how can we add value to the planet instead of subtracting value? And there are many possible answers to that questions, and not every answer should be like sweet city, right, for every city. But as you are answering that questions in a genuine manner and compromised manner, I think we are okay in that sense. Yeah.
James, I'm wondering, with all these solutions or ideas, what do you make from them, and how do they relate to your work with nature-based solution? How does that work at the World Business Council?
Sure, absolutely. So I think the key point I'd like to make here is that we're going to see a lot more of these solutions in the future, right? We've highlighted that we're in the middle of a climate crisis. Current NDCs put us on target for over 2-degree world, potentially close to 4 unless things change rapidly. We have a nature crisis, and we're in the midst of, which is just as equally strong as the climate one. And of course, we have to lift millions of people out of poverty around the world. And so we're going to see a lot more of these solutions. I think how this links to my work at WBCSD is that I work with companies to try and help them to invest money in high-quality, nature-based solution projects. And one of the one of the great mechanisms through which we have at the moment to try and deploy funding, which is desperately needed towards these activities. The amount of money spent on conservation is maybe 1/100th of what it should be, is through carbon markets and corporate climate commitments. So a number of companies, I'm sure everyone in the room is aware, have made commitments to be carbon neutral or to go net zero. And as companies ambitiously reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, they'll also then be looking to balance or to compensate any emissions that they have remaining with avoided emissions or emissions removals which will come from nature-based solutions. And these nature-based solutions have the capacity or the potential to contribute about 1/3, 30% of the climate mitigation we need by 2030. And so through these carbon markets, companies making these commitments, there's a mechanism by which we can now funnel much needed investment towards these solutions for the benefit of people, planet, and prosperity. And that's really the focus of my work and what excites me, scaling these systems up.
So how do we do that? How to scale up the nature-based solutions?
Very good question. I think, one of the main issues here we have about scaling up is that we have to make sure if we're going to finance some of these solutions through the carbon markets and through corporate climate commitments, we have to build trust and integrity in the system. We are all aware, working in sustainability, and you hear in the newspapers, these comments about greenwashing, et cetera, et cetera. And we have to make sure that we put in place the right structures and systems so that we avoid any of these accusations. And as a company, that means if you wish to invest in nature-based solutions as part of a transition to a world that I think we would all like to live in, you have to have an ambitious and robust climate strategy that includes following the greenhouse gas mitigation hierarchy, ambitiously reducing your emissions, having a strategy that's consistent with the Paris Agreement, so aiming for 45% emissions reductions by 2030, and then monitoring and measuring all of the emissions from your activities. So I help provide companies with guidance on how they can incorporate MBS into their strategy, and through this build trust in the system also with civil society organizations, so they can see that this is not a get-out-of-jail-free card for companies if they invest in nature, that any investments in nature-based solutions for climate outcomes in particular are also linked to genuine and robust action at the corporate level. And then one more point, if we have time.
Yeah, go
there's
for it.
Another element of that is not just kind of trust in what companies are doing, it's also trust in the solutions as they get developed in the ground. I think we're going to discuss a little bit later what success looks like, but one of the key things we need to make sure is that we have robust systems and standards in place so that when companies invest in these types of solutions, purchase carbon credits from nature, that they know that they're getting a genuine product that has achieved real results on the ground, that it has incorporated the views of local communities, that it has had verified impacts, led to a positive outcome for nature, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's these two aspects of the work kind of on the demand side, how companies may use these credits, how companies invest in nature, and then how we develop these projects, which are the focus of my work.
I think if I can add to that, it's the way forward, and at the same time, nature is not going to fix itself if we continue just operating as we are doing. So as much as nature-based, it's also like human, like mindset shift-based kind of thing, right? And yes, the way of conceiving products differently, or the way of considering the demand, the different needs, what are they? Like, this is all linked, and yeah, it's not just the magical one there. Nature is amazing, but we are the cause of that, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you for that, and that will be the close-up for the first round. And we'll now take a moment to look at the relationship between nature and human well-being. COVID-19 brought to the attention that humankind, our economy, and nature all belong to the same biosphere. I think Irene mentioned it a little bit, but I was just wondering, Irene, really, how do you take it into account when you have to find the balance between for example, financing the bees and financing water quality in a city that's still developing? How do you balance the different well-beings, I would say?
Well, I will say that when you start working through biodiversity and placing biodiversity as your inspiration for all the actions in the city, everything balances itself. And actually, I remember a real life story many years ago when we started to talk to the local council, and the politicians and everything about bringing back the native bees and the pollinators to the city and everything. They didn't take it seriously, actually. And they asked questions, and I remember this question specifically. And a member of the council said, how is it possible that you are talking about bees when we still have some part of the population that do not have access to drinkable water still? So yeah, that's an obvious answer for many of us, maybe, but not for the citizens, in general. So we had to work very quickly to demonstrate them how everything in an ecosystemic, way of view is interconnected. And we were able to demonstrate this connection and how the efforts that we were making were impacting directly those issues that we have to work on in the city. So I think what we have learned is actually to work on a systemic, approach where everything is connected. It's been the greater experience, and actually most of the direct indicators which are related with the measurement of well-being and happiness has many things to do with connecting with nature, with these nature-based solutions, on how the citizens experience these projects, and be close to nature in many ways.
Do you have climate heroes that share the same philosophy, Maxime?
Yeah, pretty much all of the different groups of people that I met actually had gone through this same discovery, more or less. If you think about inhabitants of this island in Samsø who have invested all of their time and energy and money to change the island to 100% renewables, to the permaculture ambassadors in France, for instance, who have demonstrated on the farm that they could achieve a lot more while production, while recreating biodiversity and the fertility of the soil. It has all been a process of getting closer to the natural elements, whether you understand that you cannot maybe launch your washing machine if the wind's not blowing because your wind turbine in your garden is not running that day. Well, maybe you'll do your washing machine tomorrow, and that's all right. Or the fact that the worms in the ground are like amazing helpers as fertilizing agents, and then they create they bring air into it, they move the earth, and then it creates a lot more services than what we could even do by hand. And then it's just understanding the value of those little things. So more or less, it's shifting your place as a person also, as not being like at the top of that pyramid like we've been kind of taught for many years or centuries by philosophers, and since the romantics and all, and just more like being part of it. And that's what I witnessed in all those different citizens and climate heroes. Yeah.
And that's amazing. And James, you get the tricky question now. How are companies and policymakers doing with this embedded vision?
Yeah, absolutely. And as Maxime has already highlighted, humans are inextricably part of natural systems. And I've highlighted earlier, we are dependent on nature for so many goods and services, food provision, pollination, fresh water from forest filtrating the rainwater. It provides us with control of diseases and agents, and provision of food and all types of different things. So naturally, obviously, if we are in the situation currently where rates of degradation of nature are so high, that's going to have a massive impact on human health. I think. Let's not forget, of course, that these impacts are being exacerbated by climate change. Certainly, if we think about nutrition, we have increasing rates and numbers of severe weather events and extreme droughts, etc. So we have water shortages, food, issues with regards to food scarcity, etc., etc. And all of this will have massive impacts on human health. I think policymakers and companies are starting to understand this approach and starting to recognize this. Certainly in WBCSD, we would like to see companies having kind of integrated health, climate, and nature strategies as a first step so that they can really start to think about these issues in a holistic way. We're in this situation because we've had very siloed thinking, as has been highlighted by Irene. But in terms of and there are some good examples of companies which are really starting to take the lead on this as well. So certainly, I know if we're talking about health, human health, GlaxoSmithKline, GSK has come out with very public commitments to invest in nature and even to invest in projects which avoid deforestation in the tropics and things. So this story and this message that we need to look after our shared biological and natural heritage is coming through into industry. I think there's also a lot of really good examples. It's really great to hear about the examples of from Irene of the Sweet City. I think from the policy perspective as well, if I think about some of the developments we see in the UK and the understanding of the linkages between nature and health, we see, for instance, doctors prescribing a visit to the forest, or genuinely, or prescribing 1 hour spent in a community garden as a treatment for various different mental health and also physical health ailments. So that's a good example of how we are starting to better recognize the linkages between nature and health and what we can do about them in the future.
Yeah, and this is not just a joke. Like, for instance, the camera is made of sensors, and then in the sensors there's twice as much green sensors as red and blue. Why? Because we were born in forests, and then a human eye is used to seeing green, and it's more sensitive to green, and then when you're in nature, you feel better and more relaxed. And it's been demonstrated by doctors,
yeah.
So yeah.
The artistic point of view, that's very nice. And on the same topic, some leaders talk actually about a nature-positive vision. I think it's a great link with what you're saying, James. And I was wondering, what is the financial viability behind this shift we're asking for, talking about?
Yeah, I think to answer that question, I'm actually going to come back a little bit to one of the points that you made earlier in talking about mind shifts. WBCSD, we share the vision that we want to live in a world where by 2059, I think it's 9 billion is the estimates, people live with health, happiness, and their well-being is protected. And that will require substantial shifts in corporate mentality and the system in which we're founded on. So there's three which I think are particularly key. We need to ensure that in the system, the economic system we're part of now, that we're really looking to create true value creation, not just focused on purely financial value creation. We need to start developing a mindset that focuses on resilience. And we also need to start looking to develop not only financial capital, but natural and social capital. If I address some of those points individually, in terms of how we actually achieve these, one of the reasons how we can kind of aim for true value is to recognize that actually one of the reasons why we're in this situation we're in a nature crisis is because we take for granted all of these services for free. We have, through the whole of human history, used these common goods and services, and we've never recognized that they come at a value or that they have a cost. And the more that we can integrate these natural capital systems into our current existing kind of financial investment decision-making processes, the better able we will be to move much more towards what I think we'd like to see, which is companies aiming for a triple bottom line, a financial return, a return on, on the environment, and also social capital. I think as well, company, I think I mentioned already, with business as usual, we're aiming at way above 2 degrees C. In terms of climate change impacts as well. And so that means that we are also baking in huge impacts on our economies and the industries in which we work. The impacts of climate change will not be avoided even if we reach the Paris Agreement goals. We will still feel those impacts. And so we genuinely think that companies need to start understanding and their interlinkages and their dependencies on nature so that they can start managing those. As they manage them, they can monitor their progress in minimizing these impacts that they might have in a negative way, and then the next shift towards a mindset which is focused much more on nature recovery, focuses, okay, if we understand our impacts on nature, we can then measure them, we can then reduce them, but then we can start looking for opportunities for where we can specifically aim to improve the situation for nature and for society. And so those are the key ways I think business can address some of these issues and some of the challenges that we have.
Do you have examples, Maxime, that can show that you can be profitable and sustainable at the same time?
Well, yeah, definitely. For instance, in food production, in permaculture or aquaculture, let's say I start with permaculture. This couple, Perrine and Charles Gruyer in France, they were able to demonstrate with the help of scientists also who studied the productivity of their farm that on 1,000 square meters, which is not a lot, but there was the test phase, the probe here, that they could generate 56,000 euros a year worth of vegetables without any fossil fuels, without any machines, just working by hand, just understanding the interrelationships between plants and how to grow their fruits and vegetables. It's the same, for instance, aquaculture. It provides huge benefits to the planet. At the same time, you can grow kelp, which is an algae which sequestrates 5 times as much carbon as land-based plants, and also grow mussels and oysters and recreate an ecosystem and eat those and sell them to high-end restaurants, to people who are in need for their diet, to have a balanced diet instead of eating a fish, and you eat the same thing the fish is eating, and then you also get all those benefits, the omega-3s and stuff. And so it's like you can definitely come up with the viable model, like in the way of also building your house and saving energy and not consuming as much water, or not to have to heat yourself as much. For instance, a carpenter in Canada, he lives in the snow for 5 months a year, and he is able to consume as much energy as a European-based household and as much water as an African-based household average. So that means that optimizing it is hugely profitable economically, both for the citizen's perspective, but also if you're a business.
And you recently portrayed someone in Luxembourg as well, a company. What is the story about?
Yeah, sure. So the newest addition is also that a small company in Luxembourg producing cider. So the idea here with Ramborn is that they are recreating biodiversity, but also they're innovating and creating products that are truly valuable. The vegetables and the fruits, they've lost so much of their nutritive value because of the way they're produced around the world. For instance, it's crazy, like a tomato before provided many calories and vitamins and stuff, and now it's like not even a tenth of what it used to be. So if you're going to like more ancient varieties of fruits, it has more taste. Of course, everybody can kind of guess it, but also provides a lot more things that are more valuable to any product. And here also it's recreating by forestry coverage because of the issue of disappearing trees, cutting trees everywhere in the world is a big issue. So if you preserve the trees and use them to benefit and recreate biodiversity at the same time, then it's a win-win-win situation.
Very nice, thank you. This will bring us to the last round on breaking the silos. We mentioned it a little bit before, but really breaking the silos between the different actors of society. Irene, I'm turning back to you. How do you include the citizens of Kuredabad into your vision? How important are they?
Yeah, well, as we are focused since the beginning in changing real life experiences within the citizens, we have introduced different participatory tools, such as this project called Spaces of Sweetness, that we give to the neighbors tools of design and urban economy, and so they can imagine the neighborhoods that they want to have, and actually we designed these neighborhoods with them. But I want to mention one of the most important and successful projects that we have in terms of participation, which are the urban gardens. This is a very good example of how a project can, attain many different things in a holistic way. These are very inspired in permaculture, actually, as the colleagues mentioned before. And actually, these places creates not only the production itself of vegetable, greens, and herbs, but also community bonding, and supports our 5 dimensions and our 7 experiences in very different ways. For example, they made people to exercise in a fun way, which is a very important factor, of happiness and well-being. The physical exercise and to be fun and conscious, and also we are working with the earthborn soil regeneration experience that we want to change. We are working with our coexistence dimension, which is very important. Also, we have this experience that we want to improve, which is conscious and nutritious eating, which is a direct factor of well-being and happiness also, the way you eat. We are what we eat, actually, in a scientific way, it's already proven. And also we are creating contact with nature, which is a direct factor also of well-being and happiness. We are improving the quality of relationships, amongst the citizens, and that's another direct factor of well-being and happiness. And we are working, in a holistic manner, many things, and we are making a good approach to mental health and well-being and happiness. Some of the citizens go to the urban gardens, just to talk to someone. Some of the citizens go because they want to eat, their own planted vegetable and herbs and greens, and some of them just want to connect and be part of something. Some of them just want to exercise. I mean, it's a very complete example of a nature-based solution project. Thank you,
Irene. James, so local communities, they play a key role in a successful project?
Yeah, absolutely. If we talk about implementing nature-based solutions, nature occurs, it's in a specific region. We're talking about places and we're talking about time. And therefore, obviously, with humans all over the world now, you have to ensure that you bring the local community into the project development. You have to make sure that as you develop a nature-based project for success, that it's addressing needs that those communities are facing now and in the future, and that they have some say in how the project is run and developed. Without bringing those voices and those views into the project development kind of cycle, then you know there's the risk that you're going to develop conflicts, and that you're going to be developing a solution which is not optimal for the issues that need to be addressed there. So I don't know, I guess to give a bit of an example, for instance, you know, a lot of nature-based solutions work focuses on forest conservation and avoiding deforestation. Now, a successful project might not be that one which, you know, you invest a lot of money in training up a huge number of forest guards who then spend years and years patrolling around the edges and preventing people from entering. A successful project is much more likely one which sits down with the community, identifies what are the drivers of natural loss. It's normally human issues and challenges which are the drivers. It's extreme poverty, it's rapid population growth and limited agricultural land. It's lack of education and other alternative other alternative livelihoods for these people. So if you can, the most successful way in which you can implement a project there is not potentially kind of a very kind of, fortress conservation approach. It's actually, okay, can we develop more productive systems for agriculture? Can we, move towards an agroforestry system where there are multiple different crops, which is a resilient system in relation to climate change and droughts and these types of things, provides multiple different sources of revenue from selling timber, from selling fruits, but also provides sustenance, et cetera, And then also one of the, what I find really interesting is, one of the biggest drivers of nature loss globally as well is that we take it for granted that you have access to financial services, and in many countries around the world people simply can't bank and they can't save money, and it goes under their bed and then they spend it when they get bored, and they can never invest in their own future or their children's future or education. And so if you can also provide these types of services, that also gives the community, builds the social capital
Yes.
Of the local communities, and allows them to take ownership of their life and their future, as it were, and really shifts the dial in terms of environmental degradation. And yeah, absolutely, these are the critical issues if you want to have a successful project. It's not the biological issues, it's addressing, bringing communities in, getting their involvement, buy-in, and addressing the challenges that they face with relevant solutions.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you. Maxime, you have maybe best practice for empowering communities?
I really like, it's been shown that, the city is the one most efficient level in the entire spectrum of whatever we can do of decision making, effective and adequate way to answer those things. I think, so what you're doing, Irene, is superb. And this movement of, say, the cities for climate, like those mayors who said, like, we don't care about what's going on in the world, we're going to act, we're going to do something. Obviously, yes, involving the citizens from the get-go and understanding what they need is just the key. Like those former illegal loggers in Sumatra, for instance, the Secretary of Village was initially one of the illegal loggers, and before he was Secretary of Village, and then he was elected Secretary of Village, and then he set up this cooperative where they were producing coffee. And Sumatra is one of the largest coffee producers, and in Indonesia as well, and it's a huge cause of deforestation. And then he could understand what they needed, on the ground. And if you have people involved like this everywhere, but you have to leverage what they know, what they can do. Like, for instance, in Africa, this woman who recycles plastic, she kind of leads 11,000 people to now recycle plastic and also make a living out of this activity, gathering plastic bags and other waste, and they're doing also briquetting for food cooking and stuff. She started by observing, and she said, okay, what's wrong in my surrounding? What's not healthy in my house? Or in my neighbor's house, because it's the same. If your neighbor's house is not sound, yours is not going to be either. Even more so if you're in a closed village, close-knit village. So starting by observing and then using those skills and that power of the people themselves to include them in the project, it's the only way to succeed, I think.
Great. While you were talking, I checked out for a few questions for the public. And actually, some people are curious to know if you're going to continue explore the world to meet new climate heroes, or what are your next project?
Well, there are two things. I mean, as you know, you always have to do lots of things at the same time. For climate specifically, you know, climate was something new that people kind of discovered in 2009 and 10 when we were really putting this out to the headlights. Now it's a given. Now we really know there's a problem. It has evolved, at least in my mind also, but in the way that people understand it, into something more global, how we live, how we consume. It's a lifestyle issue. It's a productivity issue. It's a world economic problem as much and a mind shift problem, a mindset problem. So I'm working on projects now that also tackle our desire not to accept any limitation in what we do. And for instance, the Mega Fire project that I was working on for the last 2 years in California, it's also about why we want to be in all those places and why we want to go back, even though that is burning every year. And it's more of a philosophical introspection into how we behave as a group, you know, and why we want to be there, for instance, why we want to live in those places, and can we afford to go somewhere else? And if we cannot, why? And as much as Climate Hero specifically, I'm kind of looking forward to being able to demonstrate at a regional level, say Europe, for instance, the most impactful levers of what can work for European citizens, because the first phase of the project was really worldwide. And I know, you know, by region, you can act differently. You don't have the same economic background and ability to affect your environment. So trying to plan on such a regional-based kind of chapter also for different parts of the world as well.
Thank you. James, very quickly maybe, someone asked, as an individual, can you apply a nature-based solution? So maybe yourself, you're having a nature-based solution you're applying?
Yeah, there are some great examples of individuals applying nature-based solutions. Certainly there's been a movement, a bit of an underground movement over the last few years to rewild your own local environment. So certainly in places in the UK and in Switzerland, we have, you know, these roundabouts, and they're just totally sterile, just covered in grass that's mown like every month. It adds nothing for biodiversity. There's a lot of people now, therefore, taking action into their own hands and saying, why don't we establish a microforest? We've heard about, you know, how important these are for human health from a psychological perspective. They really help calm us down when we're particularly anxious, and therefore, you know, really help us deal with some of the chronic issues, health issues that we see. And so there's opportunities to do this. There's so many kind of urban spaces which are abandoned, which could be used to build and restore our natural capital, little forests, maybe community gardens, of course, as well. You know, we heard how important it is to have a community come together here, and I think that's one thing that we really need to do. I think what really excites me about the opportunities for urban nature-based solutions is really we have to rebuild those connections with nature, because it's the lack or not willing to recognize those connections with nature before, which has got us to the current situation. And so every little opportunity, as small as it is, I think we should take.
So your word is, let's go to nature.
My
basically.
word, yeah.
And Irene, I have a last question for you. It's very quick and easy. It's bees or trees? Which one would you choose?
I can't. There's no one without the other. I mean, they are totally interconnected, and yeah, both.
Both, it's fine as well. Well, thank you, and it's time for me to conclude this conference. So Irene, James, and Maxime, thank you so much for being with us today. Personally, I think that in these challenging times, it's really great to find inspiration or be reminded that there are great people, great stories out there. And I hope everybody who watched us today felt the same. Anyways, the Luxembourg Sustainability Forum continues this afternoon. We have many other great guests talking about low techs, talking about actions for biodiversity in Luxembourg itself. So we'll get back at 1 p.m. We have a little break of 1 hour. If you want, you can check out 2 quizzes we made on the first step to take for biodiversity or reducing your carbon emissions. So go check them out on the IMS's website. And then it's just time for me to say stay tuned and enjoy your break. Bye.